Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Tyler Raymond here from the Who Dat Dish podcast. This recording isn't an official podcast episode, but I'm here tonight with a very special guest to review a previous Saints game, so I thought you'd like to hear it. So here with me tonight is a great guy who covers the New York Jets. He's a passionate and sports enthusiast and is a part of the Score 1260, a local Central New York radio station. So please, everyone give a warm welcome to Paul Esden Jr. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing fantastic, Tyler. Thank you so much for having me on the
No problem.
podcast. It means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's funny. For those of you who don't know, I tried the first time, but unfortunately, iPhone applications don't work so well. But so what I like to do for you tonight, Paul, is introduce you a bit to the people at home listening. This is the first time you've been on the podcast, and then we'll dive right into review some football. How's that sound?
Fantastic.
Perfect, perfect. So let's kick it right off. Tell me, what do you do in the sports world?
Yeah, sure. Well, I do a variety of things in the sports world. I think that's kind of the day and age of where we are in sports. My day-to-day job, Monday through Friday, and often on the weekends, I do sports talk radio in Syracuse, New York. I'm a part of the morning show, which is Bud and the Man-Child, 10 to 12 in the mornings, and that show's been on for the last 15 years. I've been a part of it for the last 2.5 years. And most recently, I've been promoted to running the afternoon drive. That's 3 to 6. I do that as a solo show Monday through Friday, talking Syracuse sports, but also that's kind of the backbone. But I also talk Jets, Giants, Bills. And on the side, because I can't get enough work, I just love working. I also cover the New York Jets freelance style for a variety of sites, but mainly EliteSportsNewYork.com. And I also freelance and cover the Syracuse football and basketball teams as well. So, I think in this, like I said, in this day and age, you can't
Yeah.
just do one thing anymore. The anchor man doesn't exist. 6 o'clock anchor man, do your cast, go home. You have to be able to be versatile, especially with the podcast world as well. I do the Jet Zone podcast,
Yeah.
among others. So, I have my hat in a bunch of different rings for sure.
There you go. You can never have too many you can never have too many eggs in one basket, you know. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so what made you decide to pursue the career sports? Now, how did you get involved with the Score 1260?
Sure, I'll answer your first question
Okay.
first. And here it is. Like I said, I've had a passion for sports for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, I kind of had dreams and goals of playing football professionally. Football was my favorite sport of
Hmm.
choice. I played all different kinds of positions on my football team in New York because of the kind of lack of depth. I
Yeah.
played. So a 5'3", 150-pound running back sounds surprising, but I played middle linebacker. I played defensive. I mean, they put me wherever they could fit me. I played
Hmm.
secondary, linebacker, running back. You name it, you got it. Unfortunately, that's kind of where my football career ended after high school. Didn't get any offers from college, and
That's
so basically what I had told myself was, hey, if I can't play the sport I love, I'll talk about the sport that I love. So from that standpoint, excuse me, sorry about that.
you're good. You're good.
I did some internships. I went to college for sports broadcasting and sports journalism, and went for that for Cayuga Community College. Not to get too deep in everything that
You're
I've
good.
done, but I went to college for it. Got an internship out of college, and I'm one of the lucky ones to be able to get a job quickly in the field in which they studied. And I was initially at the Score 1260 as an
Mhm.
intern, and I was with the radio show for a couple of months, and then they got signed on by ESPN Radio in New York,
Yeah.
and they wanted to bring me with them. They thought I did a good job, and then I got a job at ESPN. I was there for about a year and a half. I didn't really like the fit. I liked everything that ESPN brings. When I say the word ESPN, it perks
Mhm.
people's ears. They're like, yeah, ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports. So I felt like at that point I had gotten everything that I could out of ESPN, and I came back to the Score 1260. And from there, I came this past spring. I rejoined the Score 1260, and from there, I've gotten promoted in just a couple of months to a bunch of on-air opportunities, and really enjoyed my work. So that's kind of how I got back to the Score 1260, and I couldn't be happier with the choice.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds great. It's funny. I know you mentioned the Scores 1260. Obviously, you and I are both familiar with the Syracuse Chiefs.
Of course.
AAA baseball team. It seems like all they ever mention, was the Score 1260 and how they have people on, and it's great listening to. That's for sure. But it's funny. I want to switch topics a bit here. Obviously, you mentioned a bit earlier you're a Jets fan. How did that come to be? I know you mentioned that to me once before, but for the people at home, what's the story you want to tell about how you became a Jets fan?
Sure. Yeah, it's a story I tell often, and here's how it works. You're basically a product of your environment, and what had happened is my family is very split. My father's a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's a New England Patriots fan. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And really, what happened was initially, me and my father, as Paul Esden Jr., we have the same name, and it took a lot of pride, and we had a special relationship we still do to this day. And I was a Dallas Cowboys fan by trade. I watched the games with my dad forever. And underneath, my grandfather gave me the nickname the Jet when I played Pee-wee football and everything else. And, I was fast. I kind of ran around. He used to do the Jets chant, but I never really correlated it to the New York Jets. So I was kind of a Cowboys fan. But I was starting to pay attention to the Jets. And then, like I said, kind of the table turning moment for me that I remember was like I was a quasi Jets fan, but really I was still the diehard Cowboys fan for my dad. But I go back to this moment with Tony Romo is probably back in like 2004, 2005. My dates are a little fuzzy, but
you're good.
When Tony Romo took a snap against the Seahawks and he fumbled the snap and blew it, my dad was spiking things all over the house. And I feel like as a sports fan, you have to be invested in your team, the highs and the lows. When they win, there's got to be this euphoria that comes out. And when they lose, you should feel terrible because you're so invested in this team. You're supposed to pay attention to it 24/7, 365. And I didn't get the feeling of terror that my father did when the Cowboys lost. I kind of said, you know what? This can't be my team. I just don't have anything invested in this team. And I went back to what my grandpa said, and it's a weird story. A lot of people have different stories to how they become fans, but I'm an absolute diehard. I pay attention to the team. Obviously, I cover them for Elite Sports New York, but I've been covering them 24/7, 365 for a long time via podcasts and articles. And I've been covering the team for years. So, yeah, I'm as diehard as you get.
That's great. It's funny. I hope someday I can be hopefully I'm able to accomplish what you've done so far, having a passion for the team, but at the same time, you've been able to, combine your passion, but yet, your work with it, and
yeah, absolutely. I got to tell you, I'm blessed. It's been a great blessing that, by circumstance, I kind of moved up here in 2008 to the New York area. I had been in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and it's just kind of my dad got a bunch of job offers when he retired from the Navy in 2008, and one of them just happened to be in New York, and my mother just kind of randomly picked it. And once I came up here, the Jets used to, for training camp, go to Cortland, which was reasonably, 3 or 4 hours away, but it was always within distance wherever I lived in New York. And I got to see the Jets in person. I've got to go to a couple of games and cover the team, which I've been very blessed, and I'm humbled by that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was to say, where would we be without football? Where would
right? Yeah.
Be? Yeah, but what do you appreciate most about being a Jets fan? Obviously, you've seen a lot of progression, a lot of transition over the years. This team has been molding, it's been changing. What do you appreciate most about, being a Jets fan?
I enjoy the process. And for me, obviously, I have not been alive to see the Jets win a world championship. It hasn't happened since '69. But with that, I've seen kind of the highs and lows of this team. I was a part of many, many horrible seasons of Jets ineptitude. And then there's been moments in my Jets fanhood that have been thrilling, to say the least. And to mention a couple, 2008, Brett Favre comes in, Broadway Brett, Jets can possibly win the division. The Jets
Yeah.
are 8-3. They have the number one seed in the playoffs. They end up falling completely out of it when they go 1-5 down the stretch, and the Jets miss the dance. Then they get rid of Brett Favre, bring in some young kid named Mark Sanchez. As soon as he's drafted, John Gruden calls him the next Drew Brees. Jets go to 2 straight AFC championship games. The first one, they have a great first half. They have a terrible second half. The second time straight year, they have a terrible first half and a fantastic second half. You put those together, they've got a Super Bowl appearance. And really missing the playoffs this season now for the 7th time, thanks to the New Orleans Saints, who put the final dagger in the Jets' slim playoff hopes. No, thank you. I appreciate that. So, the highs and lows, I enjoy the process, and maybe that's a weird thing to say, but really, when this every time that this team has an embarrassing moment, the butt fumble, there's been so many terrible moments as a Jets fan that I just think that, you know what, this is all going to be so worth it when the Jets finally hoist a Lombardi trophy, whenever that's going to be. So I just trust and enjoy the process. That's my favorite part about being a fan. And really, I enjoy almost the off season more than the season. And I know that sounds weird, but the off season, I feel like if I can ever get my dream job is to work for the Jets as either a scout or a coach, anything I can do with the Jets one day, reporter, whatever I am able to do and chase. I just enjoy the draft, the off season process. I enjoy kind of and if I bring it to a Madden level, I enjoy kind of putting a team together and filling weaknesses and doing analytics and research and how it can improve the team. So I really enjoy that process, and then you get to kind of enjoy the fruits of the labor as the season comes. So really, I enjoy the process.
Oh, man, I can tell you it is so fun, and I'm almost right in the same boat with you because, during the off season, I love it just as much as the season, taking a look at the prospects, seeing who's available possibly for the draft. Oh, it's so much fun. And I can almost relate to you a bit there, too, when you said the highs and the lows. I can't relate. I haven't been alive long enough to experience the unfortunate circumstances of when the Saints were practically the Cleveland Browns of this day and age. But I've been through a few 7-9 seasons, so that hasn't been too good. But let's see here. Here's another good one for you. Whether it be on the team right now, whether this current roster or off the team, for as long as you've seen the Jets, you've been a fan, who would you say is your favorite Jets player and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Man, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of Jets that have kind of struck the heart chords over the years. I mean, I could go with a Wayne Corbett, a guy in terms of the stature that I can relate with, and starting from Hofstra and finding his way on a team and his incredible career, certainly. And the Jets, and some people may look at this as a detriment that the Jets bring in future Hall of Famers kind of in their last couple of years. For instance, you had guys like Ronnie Lott, who played for the Jets, Jason Taylor, LaDainian Tomlinson, Alan Faneca. You had all these guys that the Jets brought in free agency that they were kind of past their prime at that point. But I'm a huge LaDainian Tomlinson fan, but I'd be remiss as a diehard Jets fan if I didn't say my favorite player of all time would have to be Curtis Martin. And he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. While he did start his career with the Patriots, the Jets were able to do the infamous poison pill deal, restricted free agency to steal away Curtis Martin from the New England Patriots. A class act, one of the oldest players ever to run to lead the league in rushing, And, his Hall of Fame career certainly is there. But as a former running back, LaDainian Tomlinson certainly is up there in terms of favorite Jets. While his career obviously wasn't as long, he only spent 2 years of his magical career with the Jets. He's another player I idolized and looked up to for a very long time. So that's a great question, but definitely I think I would have to go with Curtis Martin.
There you go. It's funny for me. It sounds like you've got a lot of history there. There's a clear, obvious reason why you like the player, and I'll tell you mine. I don't remember telling you the first time, but mine was Will Smith. It's funny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he actually, he grew up from his grandmother. He was raised by his grandmother down around Utica, New York.
New York, that's right.
Yeah, and my grandmother, at the time, she isn't as much now, but at the time, she was all into sports. And, obviously Will Smith at a young age was really impressing. And, she called my dad up. She was like, Robbie, that's his name. He goes by Rob. She's like, Robbie, there's this kid, from down here. He's doing great, and it was just funny to see how the great transition, Will Smith made from being so young to high school to college, and then we finally got drafted. Me being I wouldn't say bandwagon, but me, I followed in my father's footsteps when he decided to go with the Saints. I was like, hey, I'll be a Saints fan too, and the rest was history. But he was a class act too, and I definitely miss him. So unfortunately he passed away. Right. But yeah, two great players. So you mentioned, I mentioned, but yeah, I think this is a perfect time to, now that we're talking about football a bit, to get into the Saints-Jets game. So in Week 15, the New York Jets came to the Mercedes-Benz Superdome to face the red-hot New Orleans Saints. Although the Jets put up a valiant effort, I do have to give credit to you guys. I was very surprised by the score by the end of the game. The team surprisingly fell just short to the Saints by a score of 31-19. So I'll start off with you, Paul. After the game, what was your initial thoughts and reactions after seeing the game?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, you and me both, in terms of the valiant effort the Jets were able to put up. They did that in spite of average at best quarterback play with Bryce Petty under center. He's now 1-4 as a career starter. But with Bryce Petty, I mean, the defense really stepped it up. You can either say the Saints stumbled offensively or the Jets picked up defensively. You can pick whichever you'd like. It wasn't a perfect game plan. They got the turnovers. Brandon Coleman 2 fumbles, and then obviously kind of Drew Brees getting pressured, some inside penetration in the pocket. Leonard Williams with kind of a stunt pass rush, drop back in coverage, was able to kind of steal one from Drew Brees with the interception. Those were the turnovers in the ball game. The Jets hadn't created a turnover in a month, so to get 3 was incredible. But really, the Jets, I believe, only got 3 points off of those turnovers, and that's obviously unacceptable in any situation to only get that many points. But in a road situation against one of the best teams in the NFL, that's just not a recipe for success. So valiant effort, certainly, and for the Saints to have 2 Pro Bowl running backs on the same team, I think that's the first time in like 50 years that we've seen something like that. It's incredible, and they were the key. The Saints quickly got off to a 10-0 lead. Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, they ran the ball effectively, although Mark Ingram's stats got padded at the end with that 50-yard rushing touchdown. But, the receiving game was incredible. Kamara, a healthy Kamara, adds to your offense something that just simply doesn't exist without him. So to have Ingram and Kamara in the backfield and dynamic, and Drew Brees, while we talked about before, he's not putting up the video game numbers he has in the past, but he's more than a capable Hall of Fame future quarterback for the Saints. So he can wing it when he has to, but the running game is clearly the straw that stirs the drink for this Saints offense.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting, to say the least. After I saw the highlights, I took a look back at everything happened, and it was definitely, going into this game, I had a different expectation versus the reality of what actually happened. And as great as this offense, the Saints offense, could be sometimes, I think we have an issue of being wildly inconsistent. Sometimes the Saints just find random games to, lay an egg and, go through and out multiple times, or, just fall flat, so to speak. And it showed this game. And I give credit to your Jets, but I was surprised in the end. When I was taking a look at, the end of the third quarter, how everything was playing out, it just felt like a game the Saints were going to lose. And while I have that here, I'll mention some stats just to give the people listening at home some perspective of how things turned out. For the Jets side, they had Bryce Petty start the game. He was 19 39 for 179 passing yards. His yards per attempt was 4.6. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. I give him credit for what people were expecting out of Bryce Petty and what he was able to accomplish. I think it was bigger, the whole picture. Obviously, the stats aren't everything, but the whole picture of what he was able to do for your team, to put you guys in position, throughout the game. I give credit to him there. Drew Brees on the other side was 26 of 36, had 285 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns and a pick, like you mentioned. For the rushing, the Jets actually had a bunch of main running backs that helped the load for Bryce Petty. The main one was Powell. He had Bilal Powell, I believe his first name is.
Bilal Powell, yes.
Yeah, there you go. He had 13 attempts for 44 rushing yards and a touchdown. You had Elijah McGuire, who I was a huge fan of for the offseason. I was surprised actually when the Jets took him. I was very happy for him. He had 4 rushing attempts for 24 yards, and he also had 3 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. Matt Forte had 7 attempts for 24 yards. He also had 2 receptions for 10 yards. On the Saints side, Mark Ingram, like you mentioned, had a pretty good game at the very end. He stat padded himself a bit. He had 12 attempts for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara, like we mentioned, had a pretty decent game, coming back from an injury, a concussion against the Falcons. He had 12 attempts for 44 rushing yards, and on the receiving side, he had 6 attempts for 45 yards, 6 receptions, and a touchdown. Michael Thomas also had a big day, nearly having 10 receptions for 100 yards. He was just short of that. And
what a poor guy, man. He kept having touchdown after touchdown called back, and he finally ends up getting in the end zone. My God, the poor guy. I felt bad for all the fantasy owners out there.
Yeah, no, it was funny because I was watching the highlights, and I was going through it all. And, like, Michael Thomas is the type of guy where, if the ball's thrown his way, you would expect, like, oh, yeah, here comes Michael Thomas. He's probably going to be one of the targets Drew Brees goes to for, maybe a touchdown catch in the end zone, but man, his feet just couldn't keep up a couple times, and I'm glad he finally got one, considering everything he had to go through to get it. But man, just things were not like if you had to flip a coin, they were not on the Saints side. I love using metaphors, but yeah, things did not just go their way during that game. But looking back at the game from a Jets perspective, because obviously the Saints fans don't always know from the other side of the ball how the Jets did and how Jets analysts and reporters think of their team. What do you think the Jets did well and didn't do well against the Saints?
Oh, 100%. The one thing that they didn't do well was something they've been doing well all season, and that's getting their leading receiver, Robbie Anderson, undrafted wide receiver out of Temple, the ball. And I think that's a credit not only to the Saints, Marshawn Lattimore, the future defensive rookie of the year, completely shutting down Robbie Anderson. But I really think in terms of the offensive game plan, I don't think they took enough shots over there. And kind of when they did, he just kind of dropped the ball. So taking away Robbie Anderson was a key for the Jets, especially for a backup quarterback coming in, only getting his 5th start of his career. I mean, that is huge into itself, because that security blanket was suddenly gone for Bryce Petty, and he was forced to try to do things that he wasn't used to doing. And Robbie Anderson's a key part of this offense. In terms of what they were able to do well, the turnovers, as we've talked about earlier, forcing those was fantastic. We got a nice pair of rookie safeties. I was hoping they'd be in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year. They haven't put up the necessary stats, sexy stats like interceptions and whatnot, to be in that conversation. Like I said, Marshawn Lattimore is going to be the runaway at that position. But they do have a nice pair of stud safeties. For the first time in New York Jets history, they drafted 2 defensive backs for their first 2 picks. That was Jamal Adams, 6th overall out of LSU, as obviously you guys know, and with the 39th overall pick, safety Marcus May out of Florida. And these are both guys I had rated very highly heading into this draft. I expected that the Jets would potentially get one of these guys. I had predicted no scenario with all my mock drafts that they would end up with both players. So it was definitely a pleasant surprise. They both got very high grades for me entering this thing. And Marcus May has outplayed Jamal Adams and the unrealistic expectations that were placed upon him. So despite losing this game 31-19, there was some pros and cons, and especially in a season that the Jets are currently 5-9. Wins and losses are not what's going to be the barometer for this team, the success or non-level of success that they're going to have this season. So for me, Robbie Anderson being taken away out of the game was huge. Austin Jenkins, the 6'6", 250+ pound tight end for the Jets, who they claimed off waivers from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He can be a weapon in the red zone, attacking the seam and a security blanket, but too often I don't know if the offensive coordinator and John Morton tries to get too cute, and from that perspective, they don't take what's in front of them with Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He's a mismatch nightmare. He's too big for corners. He's too fast for linebackers. So I was surprised they didn't utilize him more in the passing game, and he is a improved run blocker. He's one of the best run blocking tight ends in football, according to the Pro Football Focus analytics.
Yeah.
With that being said, they did some things well. They really limited the turnovers. I know Petty ended up with 2 interceptions, but at the end they were kind of forcing it with the last interception. The first one was kind of tipped. The initial throw wasn't that great to begin with on Petty, so I won't completely absolve him of that throw. It was a poor read. But from that perspective, turnovers-wise, winning that turnover battle, more times than not, that means a win. But in this scenario, it was too crazy to overcome.
Yeah, I first have to give you credit. Give your Jets the credit here. I don't think a lot of people realize it, but the Jets do have a lot of weapons. Just looking at who was in the game and who made receptions. Obviously, you have a versatile Elijah McGuire, who I really wanted the Saints to grab, but I'm happy with Kamara. He's pretty good. Robbie Anderson, he had 5 receptions for 40 yards, so still a decent game despite being limited there from Lattimore. You have Jermaine Kearse, former Seahawks player, who I was shocked when he originally got traded. I was like, wow, that's really going to help the Jets, because you have a young quarterback, you have young players. If you could bring a talented wide receiver like that over to that team, it helps them tremendously. Like you said, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, a really good tight end. I know the Saints have, played against him before. But yeah, you have Matt Forte, a veteran leader, on the running back side. Man, you guys have some great weapons, and honestly, I'm surprised that the Saints were able to limit you guys as they did to begin with. I think that would be what the Saints did well. I think the defense, despite what they've gone through, the injuries and how many weeks they've progressed, I think we still have ups and downs, and I was glad that against that game against the Jets, that the Saints were able to hold all of those weapons, because I think the Saints struggle a lot sometimes. We have so many people to cover, which player's going on which player. For example, the Saints struggled against the Patriots in the first couple weeks at the very beginning because the Patriots have a bunch of different players, and the Saints struggled mightily against the Falcons, this game recently, because the Falcons have a bunch of wide receivers and a couple good tight ends and some good running backs. But as far as what the Saints didn't do very well, I think we're just inconsistent. Like I mentioned before, you have to be dominant all 60 minutes of that football game, and it's just really unfortunate. When you see a high-powered, explosive offense being forced to punt every now and then, and then you have a fatigued defense who I wouldn't say gets obliterated, but gets really exposed, over time. I think that's unfortunate too. But yeah, I'm sure you agree. Nobody really expected this outcome. I know a lot of Saints fans that I talked to were at least thought it was going to be a blowout, And to be honest, I really wouldn't say that was a blowout, But what did you think?
Yeah, I predicted somewhere in the 45-3 ballpark. I thought it was going to be a complete bloodbath. And here's the thing: the real key was the loss of the quarterback. Josh McCown broke his non-throwing hand. The Jets have been uber competitive with the 38-year-old having a career year. He had never completed a season in his career. He seemed to be on pace for that, but of course everybody jinxed him, and he did not get to complete that season. But I think it would have been a very different team. You talked about those weapons, and the weapons are nice. The toys out of the toy chest are nice, but if you don't have somebody that can get those toys to where they need to go, if you don't have a Santa Claus, then you figure out what happens there. So, yeah, Bryce Petty was not able to get it to those weapons. Sure, I think with Josh McCown, I think the Jets are a little even more competitive than they ended up losing, obviously, by 2 scores. But, yeah, with Bryce Petty getting his first start in hostile territory at the Superdome, that's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. But I thought overall the team played exceptionally well. They lost the game, which is good because there's no point in winning at this point. Their playoff hopes were already on life support before the Saints crushed it. So from that perspective, I was okay with the loss. and you've asked me. We talked in the past, obviously,
Yeah.
and the one thing you told me is, would I change anything from this game? And to
Yeah.
kind of answer that question, I know you didn't ask it this time, but to bring up that point, there's nothing I would. I thought the Jets played very well, and competing against these teams is kind of the goal at this point. Because as long as they lose games, they keep themselves in premium draft pick conversation. They need to. There's several holes on this team that need to be filled. The higher the pick, likely the better player they'll get.
I agree. Yeah, same for the Saints. It's funny. I talked to, again, a lot of Saints fans, and we agree there are some holes, especially now with the injuries, the Saints need to take a close eye at. And I know you mentioned, like we said, if you would change anything, but here's a good one for you. Is there any specific player you wish was utilized more against the Saints? Like you said, you have a very effective tight end, when he's utilized properly. And Safarian Jenkins, maybe Robbie Anderson gets more touches. If you had to pick, or maybe a totally different player, if you had to pick a player that you wish was utilized more in the game, who would you say?
Yeah, I'll go with kind of two players here. First off, I'll keep beating the dead horse. I know that's inhumane, but I have to keep beating the dead horse. Austin Safarian Jenkins. If I could call John Morton, I had his personal cell phone, I'd be blowing him up every night because I just don't understand. I don't know how you don't – and I'm just talking about attempts. Like if you threw it to him 20 times and you didn't catch it, well, okay, I'll sleep a little easier at night because it's the attempts. This is a guy who can affect games and can do damage when given opportunities. It's just odd that the offense just seems to ignore him at certain points for no explainable reason. And when John Morton, the offensive coordinator for the Jets, again, another guy you should know very well as a former wide receivers coach for the Saints, he just can't explain. He's like, well, the game plan. I don't know what game plan exists that you don't get the ball to a 6'5", 250-pound freak. So from that perspective, Austin Safarian Jenkins, and if you ask me that question every week, I'd say, sorry, you still haven't gotten him the ball enough. So him for sure. And in terms of the backfield, I'll go to our guy Elijah McGuire. Bryce Petty's weakness is accuracy, and that's something you can't fix, in my opinion. I think with guys who have accuracy issues, there's a lot of things you can fix in the NFL. People think that, like Sean McVay, for instance, look what he did with Jared Goff. The first year, people were already throwing bust label at him. You bring in Sean McVay, quarterback whisperer, he's able to fix the mechanics, fix the arm throw, fix the footwork. Some of those things you can fix. Accuracy, you can correct it a little bit, but from how bad and how poor Bryce Petty is from an accuracy standpoint, the gimmicky offense at Baylor, that's hard to fix. So from the standpoint why I bring him up is his best throw of the game was a 38-yard drop in the bucket rainbow pass to Elijah McGuire down the right hash that got the Jets into the red zone. That was his best throw of the day, and it just displays Elijah McGuire's versatility. He can catch the ball, run the ball out of the backfield. Earlier this season, he showed the wheels with a 69-yard rushing touchdown split up right up the middle of the field, and he's got the wheels, he's got the speed. He's never going to be a bell cow for anybody wherever he goes. But in the new age of the NFL with a running back by committee, he clearly can be a key cog. The Jets have not done a good job in terms of hitting on those late-round picks. It's easier said than done. Quincy Enunwa, while he did not play this season due to a neck injury, he's a guy that they picked in the 6th round, a tight end wide receiver hybrid who has developed into a very quality 2 or 3 or 4 wide receiver, depending on your system, wide receiver that can make an impact. So for me, Elijah McGuire, you can always use him more, and you can either use him more extended as kind of a slot receiver. In that situation, I believe it was a running back wheel route down the right hash that got him open there. But you can utilize him all over the formation, spread attack, I formation, shotgun, pro style. I mean, there are so many different formations, single back that you can use in terms of halfback stretch zone reads. There's just so many intricate plays that you can use. And I would love to be an offensive analyst for the Jets so you could help get these guys the ball in space because McGuire is a beast. So really on the offensive side of the ball, it's Austin Safarian Jenkins all day, every day. And, of course, Elijah McGuire. He's just a versatile player.
I hear you. And if anyone here from the Jets are listening, open your toy chest more because I'm sure Jets fans would agree with you. that they would love to see some more explosive plays, even if it doesn't rely heavily on your quarterback. For me, I think I would just have to go and say pretty quick. I don't know. I think for me, if the Saints had to utilize one player more, I think it would be Willie Snead, and here's why. I think he's a great player when he's healthy. He's a great player when he doesn't have anything really cluttering his mind, so to speak. And I really wish, especially this season, after everything that happened, that going forward, that the Saints would finally realize you have a versatile slot demon of a wide receiver, but fortunately, he's barely getting 2 receptions a game, and it's just really unfortunate on going forward with that. But with that being said, though, Paul, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show, man. You've been a pleasure. You know, I love hearing your insightful words. I love hearing what you're able to speak into existence with your Jets talk, man. You are absolutely fascinating to hear about, you know?
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, if you guys ever need me again, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking NFL draft, so if you ever need a draft guy in the offseason, I'd love to come on and help you guys in any way that I can. So, yeah, just keep me in mind. Appreciate the love and the feedback, guys.
And one more second, too. I just want to, if you want to give a quick shout out to yourself, plug away your social media. Sure. Let the people at home know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can catch all my Jets coverage at EliteSportsNewYork.com. I also cover Syracuse sports as well. And if you'd like to follow any of my work on Twitter, at BoyGreen25. And as I told the story last time, I'll quickly squeeze it in this time. The reason why the 25 is there is because of one Reggie Bush. When I was a high school player, the varsity coach, once they upgraded me to the next level, he brought me in his office. He said, you can have 25 or 80. And I said, Reggie Bush all day, baby. Reggie Bush, I idolized him, the versatility of his game coming from USC. And as I mentioned before, but I didn't mention on this podcast this time, this Saints team, and looking at the dynamic duo of what Pierre Thomas and Reggie Bush were in 2009 when the World Championship was won, and what Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara bring to the table, I think even this dynamic duo is even better than the one with Pierre Thomas and Reggie Bush. So a phenomenal pair of players there. Mark Ingram with the career renaissance this season. I had heard sources and rumors tell me that Mark Ingram was on the trading block and that he could be had, and he ends up having this career year, which is phenomenal. I'm happy for Mark Ingram. So that's kind of the story behind the 25, and that's still a huge part of my life. But yes, and on Facebook, if you search Boy Green 25, you'll find my professional Boy Green 25 author page where I put articles, podcast, and all the like. So again, I want to thank you guys so much for bringing me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you just want to stay on the line for a sec. I'll give a final outro for this amazing little talk here. So thanks again, Paul. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. You know, this wasn't really a podcast episode, but I was introduced to Paul by our amazing editor, Roy Anderson, on Who Dat Dish, and I just figured I had to connect with him. And, you know, the rest has been history since. He's a great guy. I love talking with Paul, and I love presenting this information to you guys at home listening. But again, just make sure to check me out on Raven Tyler M on Twitter. Make sure to check out our podcast account, because this is where it usually would be podcast episodes. You can follow that on at the WDD podcast on Twitter. But yeah, guys, thanks so much. And as always, who dat?